Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Making the Most of Your On-Site Orientation and Training. We're really glad that you joined us today to discuss various aspects related to the on-site orientation and training, which we call OSOT, and just how important it is to make the most of it for you and your organization, as well as for the Vista member. My name is Eric Powell, and I'm an AmeriCorps Vista training specialist with the Corporation for National and Community Service. I did have the fortune of serving as a Vista member and a Vista leader, and participated in many OSOTs in the past. In my current role as Vista training specialist here at Vista headquarters, I work with supervisors and sponsors to provide training on various elements of the Vista program, including on-site orientation and training. Today I'll be hosting and presenting today's webinar, as well as facilitating the chat activities throughout the webinar and the question and answers throughout the presentation. Also joining us are Sabrina and Steve from our partners at LSI, who will be managing the Adobe Connect technology. You will also see them in the chat to help address questions that you might have during the session, especially as they're related to technology. We have quite a few goals to cover today. By the end of the session, we hope that you're able to avoid encountering OSOT roadblocks and know how to overcome them if you do, learn ways to prepare your Vista members for service before they arrive on site, which really starts during the application submission and interview phase, gain insight into how to use the Vista Assignment Description, or VAD, to guide your Vista members' training and professional development, which will help you and the Vista member develop a framework for service. Identify tools and gather ideas to implement a strategy to assess and evaluate the training from multiple angles and from multiple people. And we also hope that you'll be able to utilize various techniques to create an engaging, high-impact, customized, and flexible OSOT design to really motivate your Vista members and help the organization thrive. Moving from goals to the agenda, today we'll talk about how do you go from potential applicant to Vista member, and quickly review how your Vista member got to where they are now, and how you, knowing this process, can really help you define and put together your on-site orientation and training. We'll talk about the importance of OSOTs, as many of you talked about in the earlier activity. We'll discuss some brief common OSOT roadblocks that you may have encountered or may encounter in the future, the 3 facets framework to use as a design for future trainings. We'll provide a few field examples to further explain the 3 facets. We'll highlight a couple of Vista Campus resources that are available to you, and we'll have time for questions and answers. So we are here to talk about the on-site orientation and training, but to do that effectively and comprehensively, let's take a couple of steps back. It's just like the saying, of course I can't remember the author, but there's a saying that says something to the effect of, you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. So before we talk about where we're going, let's talk about where we've been with a quick snapshot of the Vista process that can help you prepare for OSOT. So first, your organization submits a concept paper and full application outlining the plan for the Vista program. Next, the CNCS State Office reviews and approves the project. Woohoo! Wait, but that's only the beginning. Then, to begin recruitment, the project posts opportunity listings and e-grants for individuals to search and apply on the my.americorps.gov website. Then, individuals search for that listing, complete their profile and member application, and then they submit their member application to an opportunity listing. Then, the Vista project screen the applicants, conduct interviews, and select the applicants they want to serve. Next, after selection, the applicant goes into their my.americorps.gov account to accept the offer. Only a couple more steps. The CNCS State Office then reviews and approves the member application, and then the CNCS State Office officially places the individual into a term of Vista service. This is a step that officially turns an applicant into a candidate. Note the very specific reason behind our word choices. At the same time this is happening, the candidate is scheduled for a Vista member orientation, which is on the same date as their first day of service. The candidate then starts service and their Vista member orientation. And during the Vista member orientation and a required webinar on their first day of service, the candidate swears into service via the oath of service and electronically submits their oath of service in my.americorps.gov. This is the step that turns a candidate into a Vista member, of course provided that they actually submit their electronic oath correctly in their account. And then finally, the member participates in the on-site orientation and training conducted by the supervisor and sponsor and begins working on the activities outlined in their Vista assignment description. Since the on-site orientation and training should nicely supplement and coexist along with the Vista member orientation, let's take just a few moments to highlight all of the elements in the Vista member orientation. It's important for you to know these elements and their timing so that you can factor them into your OSAT and use the OSAT as a way to build off of what the Vista program is providing. Vista members must start service along with the Vista member orientation, which includes these elements: pre-service coursework, onboarding forms in their my.americorps.gov account, a countdown to Vista service webinar, launching your Vista service webinar, criminal history check, the on-site orientation and training, early service coursework, and finally Vista gear. You will want to look at a few more details of this pre-work on the starting Vista page of the Vista campus, because that's the exact same place that we direct all Vista candidates so that they know what the expectations and requirements are. But let's take a minute to briefly talk about the timing of these elements and how they can integrate with your OSAT. Here's the general time frame for some communications and pre-work deadlines so that you can factor them into your OSAT and training, as well as into your own schedules. 14 days prior to the start date of service, the candidate is sent an email that we call the Guide to Entering Vista Service, which contains dates and deadlines of required pre-work and webinars. About 6 days prior to their start date, which is on a Tuesday, sometimes it's 7 days if their start date's on a Tuesday, the candidate attends their Countdown to Vista Service webinar at 3 p.m. Eastern, and they of course do this from home or wherever they are since they have not yet officially started Vista service yet. 5 days prior to their start date, their required pre-work is due, and all of the details of this are located in the Guide to Entering Vista Service that they were emailed, as well as on the Starting Vista page of the Vista campus. On their first day of service, the candidate attends the Launching Your Vista Service webinar, also at 3 p.m. Eastern, so that we can factor in all time zones, and the candidate also takes their oath of service and submits their electronic oath based on the instructions they're provided. Continuing into service, here's a couple of more components of the Vista member orientation that can be factored into your OSAT. Within their first 2 weeks of service, the member receives their on-site orientation and training conducted by their Vista supervisor or sponsor, and it's okay if your OSAT lasts a little bit past 2 weeks. Some do, some don't. The member is strongly encouraged to complete early service coursework, and the member also receives an email with specific instructions to order free Vista gear after all required pre-work is complete and the electronic oath is submitted correctly. And then finally, as part of the Vista member orientation, 30 days into service, the member's hard copy fingerprints are due at Vista headquarters. Knowing the process of how potential applicants navigate to become Vista members may be useful as you plan for their service and potentially reflect on the following questions connected to on-site orientation and training. And you can think about these over time. Where do you want to start with training when the Vista member arrives? Where do you want training and development to lead or take your Vista member throughout their year of service? What information is essential to give your Vista member in the first couple of weeks? Similar to that, what information doesn't need to be given to them right away, but it can wait until a little bit later in service so that you do not overwhelm the member? How will you make your OSAT meaningful, engaging, and useful for the member? And how will you incorporate the Vista member's interests and needs into your on-site orientation and training? So we know that Vista members want to know what to expect, they likely want a point of contact for questions, and they really want to start the year off strong. Have any of you found ways to integrate your on-site orientation and training conducted by the sponsor with the Vista member orientation conducted by Vista headquarters? How have you aligned these learning outcomes, the scheduling, and planning for success so that the two work together and feel almost seamless for the Vista member? You can post your responses into the chat panel because it might help you and other sponsors who are working to enhance their OSAT think about ways they can be creative in helping these align and be innovative in coming up with different ways to do that. So the question is, how do you or can you integrate your on-site orientation and training with the Vista member orientation and training? So one suggestion I see is have the sponsors sit through the launching webinar with their Vista and watch them take the oath so that they can be part of it. That's a great suggestion. I see a couple of other people are responding. Another comment that came in quickly was making sure that when you schedule the on-site orientation and training, you pay attention to all the dates and deadlines that we gave you earlier so that you can factor in their required webinars from Vista headquarters with what the Vista sponsors are suggesting as part of the on-site orientation and training. Lots of information coming in. We don't have time to read them all, but keep those coming in as I continue, and we'll read a few a little bit later as well. Because a lot of these ideas really do align with the ideas that we have and think as well. We know that it may not be perfect, but it really makes a positive difference when you can reference back to elements of the Vista member orientation when you're conducting your on-site orientation and training. And remember, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have so many resources out there, and you have so many resources, and you can also use the information on the Starting Vista page of the Vista campus to supplement and build some OSAT sessions. For example, take a look at the pre-service coursework and the early service coursework to help you in not just orienting your Vista to simple logistics at your site, but also thinking about how to integrate your Vista into the community and talk to them about poverty in the area so that the Vistas know why they are needed so much. Referencing some of the comments that you just posted in the chat, as well as in the opening activity on why OSAT is so important, you pointed out many reasons why it's critical to have a well-thought-out on-site orientation and training. We've had lots of conversations with Vista members, supervisors, and leaders over the years, and they frequently highlight 5 top common reasons for OSAT being important. First is crafting and fostering well-equipped members, as many of you mentioned earlier. Second, developing and cultivating strong relationships to help retain your Vista members. Third, recognizing and utilizing the strengths that the Vista members already have and bring to the site. Fourth, build mutual understanding so that there's less confusion and more agreement and understanding. And 5, inspiring and enhancing confidence in your Vista members and in you as supervisors and sponsors as well. So we are going to talk about the tactics and tips for a successful OSAT, but first, let's be realistic. Things are not always easy. There's challenges, obstacles, and sometimes there's just flat-out major issues that get in the way of having an effective OSAT. So let's talk about a few of these roadblocks quickly based on the flow of onboarding. And after each roadblock, we'll offer strategies to overcome them along with additional tips. And just a quick highlight, the roadblocks that we're going to discuss include having an unclear VAD, late recruitment, poor readiness screening, disengagement of members post-selection, and not being ready for arrival. Our first roadblock relates to the skills necessary and the connection of the service to poverty alleviation. Ensuring that your VAD is not broad and confusing is essential to a successful OSAT. So as you can see on the screen, the quote says, "I feel like my VAD assignment is very broad and that I don't have specific things to work on to keep my day busy." Well, how do we solve that? The Vista assignment description serves 2 purposes, and actually it serves a lot more than that. It's a tool for recruitment, and then once you found the right person, it's a tool for training and project management. The VAD should lay out exactly what you're trying to accomplish with each Vista position. Where there's vagueness instead of specificity, the danger of recruiting the wrong person increases, as does the possibility of not aligning your OSAT with the long-term needs of the Vista member. For example, if the VAD calls for a Vista to do grant writing, it will undoubtedly speak to those candidates with some fundraising experience. The flip side of that is true as well. when using the VAD as a recruitment tool, it will also filter potential candidates out that would otherwise take up your time in reviewing their application, interviewing, etc. So, when you post a position, you likely feel that you want as many applicants as possible. Of course, that sounds great. Except, what you probably really want is as many qualified applicants as possible. Those two things are not necessarily the same, so you'll want to be as clear as you can about what you need and what you want. There are people out there perfect for the position, and this is your best way to draw their attention to you. If you need to brush up on creating a VAD, you can download the Helpful Links document from the Adobe Connect technology in the Handouts panel, and you can access resources such as creating effective VADs. And finally on this VAD topic, even the perfect Vista candidate needs training. The VAD is a roadmap for a year's worth of training, beginning with OSAT, continuing throughout the year. For those of you that only have one Vista assigned to you, the VAD can serve as a checklist for all of the training necessary for a successful year. If you have multiple Vistas assigned to your organization, each individual VAD should be tailored to the needs for that particular position. When you look at the VADs in aggregate, you find the themes that turn into the topics for OSAT and your year-long training. So what does the Vista need to get their year started in a very literal and tangible way? You'll want to provide Vista members training on what the VAD literally says and what they need to know and do. Because the VAD is a living document, you may want to update it periodically with approval from the CNCS State Office, and make sure to also update your on-site orientation and training plan as well. Roadblock number 2, late recruitment. We hope this does not impact any of you, but we know a lot of sponsors are struggling. The quote says, "Finding ways to get the word out was a significant challenge, especially with the short time frame for reviewing applications, interviewing, and securing offers and acceptances." Well, to be honest, oftentimes when I think about bringing on a new Vista member, I really just have visions of my ideal self. I'll be on top of everything, I'll have a comprehensive Vista assignment description, I'll be set and ready to go, and I'll be swimming in incredibly talented candidates. But then, real life kicks in and I'm overwhelmed with my responsibilities, professionally and personally, and I'm rushing trying to get everything together at the last minute. It's an unfortunate vicious cycle that I get into every time, even though I always tell myself I'll do better the next time. Hopefully that's not popular among many of you, but I do get the sense from my colleagues that late recruitment and rushed recruitment is unfortunately a fairly common occurrence. In order to launch into a great year of service, we've got to start early, and we recommend about 120 days early, and have a plan. On the screen you can see OSAT tip number 2, because it's never too early to start thinking about OSAT. While you won't be finalizing every detail immediately, it's important to begin making an outline of the things that you'd like to do, because it'll help you save time later when your Vista member is at your doorstep. Sketching out the design of OSAT over time will also help avoid those sticky situations. A couple of years ago, Vista leaders developed a fabulous recruitment calendar tool. It's a downloadable file that helps you work backwards from the start date of the Vista member orientation, which is the same as the start date of service. Basically, you input the Vista member orientation start date into the spreadsheet, and all of the suggested recruitment activities are then automatically provided with recommended deadlines based on that date. It helps you keep track with enough time to do all of the things I described a few moments ago, and it allows a little bit of wiggle room for flexibility. But this time, you will have a tool that ensures those things can happen. Another quick strategy, even though I know people have struggled with it, is using eGrants. Make sure you use the opportunity listing functionality because it allows you to post your open Vista position nationally to be displayed on the My AmeriCorps website. Just remember, don't solely rely on eGrants for recruiting, but you will need to use it to post the opportunity listings and review applicants. And of course, you can find additional resources again by downloading the Helpful Links handout in the Handouts panel of the webinar. So let's move on to roadblock number 3. This is a roadblock that takes place prior to a Vista arriving to begin their year of service, and it's what we call poor readiness screening. My Vista does not know how to drive, and does not have a driver's license, so cannot get to the places I need to unless I drive them. As we all know, readiness screening is essential because it looks a little different for everyone. There are unique parts of the Vista experience that candidates must fully understand and buy into prior to accepting the position, going through their Vista member orientation, and showing up ready to serve. Recruiting candidates that understand they are signing up for a year of service rather than a job is very important. Primary to this issue is the living allowance versus a standard wage. For example, if a Vista candidate has not prepared for that reality, they're probably not going to last long, so your screening must include their understanding of joining something larger. This is a concept where many of the AmeriCorps regulations can be discussed as well, such as the Hatch Act and prohibited activities. It also helps to recruit using the year of service lens to make for a better experience for everyone, especially around expectations. Also, it's critical to screen for readiness for the particular Vista member orientation that CNCS has assigned to us. Vista candidates need to know the expectations and requirements in advance so that they can self-screen themselves. In the example that we talked about earlier, the question to ask is, will you be requiring travel as part of the Vista's assignment description? If travel is part of the service, you will need to screen for the ability to do so. Just like our introductory quote referenced, if having a viable driver's license and having a working vehicle are part of your requirements, those are essential screening questions so that everyone understands the expectations. And finally, the schedule of the service that you are recruiting for is important. Just as you would ask in an interview for a job candidate, you want to know if that candidate is available to work on weekends or in evenings, if that's part of how the VAD will be carried out. The Vistas that I supervised on a college campus, there were often activities happening late at night and on weekends. If someone could not participate in that type of activity, they probably wouldn't be very successful in their year of service. Our third OSAT tip is to be specific in your opportunity listing. When you post your open position to recruit candidates, be very specific about some of these screening items. It'll help filter out candidates that would be a good fit, and it pertains to these topics. Folks in which these things don't fit well will just choose not to apply for the position, which will increase your readiness screening without much effort from you. And hopefully the candidates that do not apply won't end up getting on your plate and disturbing you, and the candidates that do apply will be eager to fill the needs that you have. Again, there are some great tools and resources available to you on readiness screening, specifically around screening Vista applicants and searching for applicants in My AmeriCorps that you can find by downloading the Helpful Links handout. So number 4, something important to learn is keeping participants engaged throughout their service. After a successful recruitment and screening process, you probably feel like you're done. You've selected a great Vista, given them a start date, and now you're good to go. That may be true. However, keeping your Vista engaged during the time between selection and start date, we've heard, is very, very important to keeping them engaged and helping with a successful onboarding. As one Vista member staff said, people are about to start service and tell me that they don't know where they're supposed to go on their first day of service. I'm happy to help in any way I can, but this really should have been communicated to them when they were selected for their Vista position. So let's talk about keeping your members engaged post-selection, which leads into the on-site orientation and training. Once your Vista candidate is selected and has accepted the offer, be sure to support them in the transition time. This includes ensuring that they are able to relocate successfully and offering them suggestions on safe and affordable places to live if necessary. Yes, they're adults, but still they probably need assistance from you to help them start successfully. Remember that your long-term success as a Vista project and a Vista program is invested in this Vista member, so supervisors and sponsors also have to be invested to ensure a successful transition. Again, in the Helpful Links handout, you can visit a recorded webinar called Helping Your Members Thrive, which is a great way to show them how to integrate with the community, giving them other resources, and supporting them during their service. So the next element is focusing on the year of service, the second bullet on the screen. We all focus on retention of our Vista members during their year of service, but we also have to prioritize the retention of our newly hired Vistas even before they start. It can be very tempting to find employment that pays more than the Vista living allowance during this time period, and it's hard for you to argue against someone's financial interests. We really need to keep the future Vista's attention and motivation on this great year-long commitment to their country and their community that they've just made. Focusing on the year of service reminds them that this is not a job, but a commitment to eliminating poverty for a year that they should really be proud of. Next, invite them on site. This may not be possible for everyone, but if your future Vista is local or passing through on the way, invite them to attend organizational events or meetings or gatherings. Give them a little extra time to familiarize themselves with what's in the area, people, and the organization. Maybe you allow them to join staff celebrations because they're fun and helpful ways for the Vista member to get involved and really feel a part of the organization even before officially becoming a Vista member. Sending them information. You don't have to email them every single day. They actually might get annoyed at that. But we know no one likes homework, but people do like to feel prepared and have an idea of what to expect. So maybe you send them an email once a week with some background reading, news articles, stories about your organization, or things that they should do research on before they start service. Because this fits right in with OSA tip number 4. Share the on-site orientation and training plan with your Vista candidate before they start service. It's a fabulous roadmap for their first few weeks as a Vista member and will help them avoid feeling confused or unclear. It'll give them an outline of what to expect and let them add suggestions to it. Making your on-site orientation and training responsive to emerging needs before they start is key. Next, making connections. We know that retention often boils down to person-to-person connection. You can really help create some connections with your Vista and other Vistas currently serving in your organization or region. If they develop positive social relationships, they're much more likely to feel that they will be missed if they back out before they are supposed to start. It's really the positive side to peer pressure. Also, communicate to them that you are very excited about them before they arrive. The bottom line is that your future Vistas want to know that they're valued and appreciated. Everyone wants to feel wanted and needed. If your Vista knows that you're excited and really looking forward to their year of service, they'll feel more excited and look forward to their year as well, and they're likely to be more effective and engaged. Be sure to eliminate any doubts about their decision to become a Vista by making it seem like the most fun, coolest, impactful thing they will ever do in their life. And we touched on it earlier, continuous communication. All of these things can be achieved through constant communication with your future Vista after you select them and before they start service. Sometimes the simple things like checking in on how their search for housing is going can really make a difference as to whether they accept your position or decide to take another position. While it sounds like a lot of effort, it really pays off for you in the end. And finally, roadblock number 5. Our 5th roadblock discusses biggest challenges around not being ready for arrival. So the quote is, "My biggest challenge is the Vista member orientation. Not every Vista is an online learner." It's a great comment. Well, let's see how we mitigate that. Sometimes, the gear up for the arrival of a Vista takes all of our energy and focus. Then, once they begin their service, you're left scrambling to help them hit the ground running. They've got 1 year to accomplish what they're trying to do, and they really don't want to waste a minute. So it's incumbent upon us as supervisors to make sure that they don't. So as you begin to think about the arrival of your Vistas, think about 4 key elements that you want to be prepared to provide as soon as you're able to and it's appropriate. The first is orienting and training your Vista on your organization or host site. Being purposeful and orienting your Vista to the organization will help support a successful year of service. I recommend setting aside several hours in the first couple of weeks to really provide key information and to introduce the Vista around the organization. Let them know that they're appreciated and needed. A second key element in preparing for arrival is orienting your Vista to the community. Your Vista really wants to understand the community in which they will serve in terms of its geography, especially if your Vista member is new to the area. They want to know its culture, its governance, its systems, its people, and a whole lot more. You really don't want them to fall into the mindset that they are coming in to save the community from poverty, but instead, you want to help them respectfully enter the community and understand their place in getting the community mobilized. So we recommend ongoing orientation to the community throughout their year, which may include taking them to lunch in favorite eateries or showing them places of your favorite interest. We'll next move on to a third key element of a successful OSAT, which is orienting and training your Vista on the tasks they will be completing and the knowledge they will need to do so. Be sure to review their Vista assignment description with them and ask what skills and knowledge they will need to complete their tasks, assignments, objectives, and goals. We'll talk in a few minutes about an activity that you can do that will really help you tease this out. Work with them to identify skills that they will need, secure training for their position, whether it's internal or external to your organization, and tap into skills that they already have. Our OSAT tip number 5 encourages all Vista supervisors to prepare for the arrival of your Vista member by aligning the on-site orientation and training with the different needs of members. Your Vista will arrive on-site on the same day their Vista member orientation starts, filled with excitement, nervousness, uncertainty, and eagerness to get started. Using OSAT to build upon and channel that excitement will help your Vista get moving quickly and feel empowered. And this brings me to our fourth key element, which is preparing for the Vista member orientation. Again, we covered a lot of the details, so make sure that you know the details and provide them to your Vista member as well. The Vista member orientation contains strongly suggested early service coursework for the Vista members to help them think more deeply about poverty, the profile of their community, and more. Some of the coursework is best fulfilled with supervisor buy-in and participation. All of these assignments are a great way for your Vista to better understand your organization, the community it serves, and the tasks they are responsible for completing as part of your greater mission. So, since on-site orientation and training is so important and you want to conduct a thorough orientation and training to overcome roadblocks as much as possible, one question on your mind might be, after all this talk about OSAT and all the discussion we're going to have, how long should my OSAT be? Or, how do I know if my OSAT is the right length of time? So let's take a quick poll and see how long your on-site orientation and training is. You should now see a poll on your screen that's temporarily placed over the chat panel. When we're done with the poll, we'll move the chat panel back so it's visible. But please select only one response in answer to this question. We'll give you about 30 seconds to answer this question. How long is your OSAT in duration? Is it 1 day, 2 to 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks? You might be unsure because you're not specifically involved with the OSAT plan, or maybe you haven't implemented an OSAT yet, but will soon. Whether you created the OSAT plan, will be creating one, or just inherited one and want to improve it, it's essential to think about the ideal duration. If it's too short, you're probably not providing enough context and background information, and the Vista member may feel inadequately prepared. If your OSAT is too long, you might overwhelm and potentially bore the Vista member and provide too much detail too soon, such that the Vista member is stressed out and feels that they cannot absorb all the information at once. So I recommend putting yourself in their shoes. Think about if you were in their position. What would you want to see in an orientation? In an ideal sense, how long would you want it to be? What would you want a little time spaced in so that you'd have time to increment and add your own ideas to the on-site orientation and training? So it looks like we've got a good number of responses, so we'll go ahead and close the poll now. And if you didn't have a chance to respond, don't worry. We have a lot of activities coming up. It seems like most people, their on-site orientation and training is about a week, which is a pretty good time frame. A few people say 1 day. A couple of people say they haven't created one yet, which is fine. There's still plenty of time to do that. So this is a good survey. Certainly there can be effective methods used in slightly shorter or longer time frames, but remember that you don't have to impart every single piece of knowledge to a Vista member in their first 24 hours. Instead of cramming the OSAT into 8 hours a day for 5 days, consider breaking it up into 2 weeks or so to give a little time in between orientation elements for the Vista member to process everything and how it connects with the Vista assignment description. So now that we've looked at some common roadblocks and tips to get through them, let's transition to discussing a framework model to help you craft and adapt your on-site orientation and training. The duration of your OSAT impacts and is impacted by the content of the OSAT. When we ask Vista members and leaders about their OSAT experiences, those who indicate that they had a very meaningful OSAT seem to highlight 3 key dimensions or facets. This 3-facet framework highlights important elements to be considered when it comes to things such as training, which of course includes your on-site orientation and training, and it helps to make them engaging, responsive, and customized. So we'll take each of these trainings and facets individually to look at how they impact OSAT design. We'll discuss some real-life examples from a field representative, and we'll provide an opportunity for you to do some peer sharing of effective practices that you have. First, a customized OSAT will be shaped by the VAD, by the community needs, and the project goals. And last but not least, it'll also be shaped by your Vista member's strengths, skills, and experience. Next, creating an engaging and interactive OSAT means incorporating adult learning principles. We know that one of the key principles of adult learning is to make learning an active experience. For example, if members need to learn about community meeting facilitation protocols and how to facilitate a meeting in the community, you can have them participate and observe a local meeting, watch a video of a local meeting, review a case study of mistakes someone made trying to facilitate a meeting, or hear a current Vista talk about their meeting experiences. There's many other adult learning principles, such as peer learning, reflection, and experimentation that we review in depth in the recorded On-Site Orientation and Training Makeover webinar available on the Vista campus. Lastly, the OSAT needs to be responsive to emerging needs. Of course, we know things change, things ebb and flow, and you may not have thought about everything yet. So check in with your member during and after their Vista member orientation to find out what questions they still have. Discuss the training needs with other staff, and solicit feedback from your members by conducting a training evaluation at the end of your OSAT. We encourage you to download the Helpful Links document. I know I mention this a lot, but there's a lot of really helpful links in the document, including a link to the webinar we mentioned on OSAT Makeover, which is similar but different than this webinar. So let's identify each of these briefly. First, creating a customized OSAT design. We invite you to at least focus on these 3 items when customizing the OSAT for your member: the Vista assignment description, project design or plan, which involves community needs and profile, goals, objectives, and outcomes, and the member's resume, which probably highlights some of their strengths, skills, and experience. Using these sources, you can identify what are specific knowledge elements and skills that the member will need to carry out the VAD. You will also be able to identify the relevant existing strengths and skills members bring to the project. And we're going to show you in a second a simple training needs assessment and analysis worksheet that really helps you identify the OSAT training topic areas. As you can see on the screen, and we talked about the VAD, the project plan design, and the member resume, this training needs assessment tool will really help you identify the most relevant and important topic areas for the OSAT and allow you and the members to get the most out of the OSAT experience. And you can see really quickly the spreadsheet is sectioned out, so you list the VAD activity, then you list the required knowledge aspects, and you mark whether the Vista candidate or member is currently equipped with that knowledge or if there's required training and orientation to get that knowledge. Similarly, for each VAD activity, you write down what the required skills are and whether that Vista member has those skills or what trainings you can do to give them those skills. It's a simple spreadsheet but very useful. And we know this information might be simple and easy to look at, but how does it translate to building and enhancing an OSAT design? Well, we're going to provide a field example from JC at Feeding Texas and how they design their trainings for a multi-site project in relation to training needs assessments. J.C. Dwyer is the Senior Director of Policy and Communications for Feeding Texas. Feeding Texas is the state association of 21 Texas food banks, and their goal is to address the causes and effects of food insecurity by having Vista members build partnerships with organizations that can provide our clients with health and nutrition services and financial stability services. So Feeding Texas is an intermediary organization, and I know several of you on this webinar are as well, but they also provide statewide training and assist their food banks in developing their individual OSAT plans. For the larger intermediary training, Feeding Texas worked to customize the training to the needs of the Vista members serving at different sites. They know that it's important to keep the training sessions focused on background knowledge as well as the big picture to help Vista members understand the local issues and the larger issues at a larger level. Then, the specific statewide training is an opportunity to facilitate relationships between the Vista members. This is unique to programs that have intermediaries, as they give Vistas time to meet and bond, as well as teach about specific reporting requirements customized to their project. As an intermediary, JC's team provides guidance to their sub-sites on developing their on-site orientation and training to really make sure that they include several things in their first few weeks of service, two of which are the most important to be customized to the Vista member and the site. And those are the Vista assignment description and setting aside a time to talk about what the Vista member wants and needs to be successful during and after their year of service. So with that information that JC provided, let's go ahead and transition to the second facet, creating an engaging and interactive OSAT process. Before we look at a few aspects in relation to this facet, let's hear some of the creative ways that you make your on-site orientation and trainings interactive and engaging. Go ahead and enter your ideas in the chat. I know some of you earlier talked about different ways that you've made them engaging, whether it's looking at the resume and looking at skills people have and their interests, and finding ways to incorporate activities in the on-site orientation and training that specifically point to that Vista member's interests. There was a mention earlier also of a sponsor who makes their OSAT interactive and engaging by having some fun, doing some icebreakers, doing some fun activities, not just giving them this is what you need to know and telling them this is how it's going to be, but really making sure that they're engaged in the process. So as you type them in, I see a couple coming in as well in addition to the ones. Oh, I like this one, including a scavenger hunt throughout the city, taking them through fun events so that they can actually get to know the city and find their way around. Another supervisor spread their OSAT out over 2 weeks, which allows the Vista time to put gaps and stamps on their training. So that way it's not just a full week of you training them, but giving them time to insert things that they need. And I'll mention one more as a lot more are coming in. Another supervisor does a poverty simulation to really give them a little bit more of a perspective of what poverty looks like in general, but also in their community. So these are great, and definitely keep these coming because, like I said, a lot of supervisors on this webinar can definitely benefit from other ways that you out in the field are also making your orientations engaging. We know that some of the OSATs are generic, some of them are specific, but we also know that regardless of what your OSAT involves, it's useful for you to think about if you would find your own on-site orientation and training engaging. And we recommend that you give someone else your OSAT plan and have them give you their input so you can find out if there's something missing or something that you should add to it. So now that we move on to step number 2, creating an engaging and interactive OSAT process. One of the key adult principles in learning is to make learning an active experience for adult learners. Therefore, it's not just about being passive, but making it active and designing the OSAT so that everyone can utilize these 4 ways to make the OSAT active and engaging. First is experiential learning. Many people learn through hands-on experience. It's an active learning while doing, not just passive learning from listening and observing. Collaborative and peer learning. Whether your Vista member is the only Vista member at their location, or maybe you have many of them, make sure you create opportunities for collaborative learning. Not everyone likes to share and learn in group environments, but it allows you to develop focus groups or sessions that are geared towards people sharing information and knowledge so that they can work one-on-one, but also in terms of groups. Which relates to step number 3, multiple reflective settings. Keep in mind that a lot of people are introverts, some are extroverts, and it's good to know that about people, including thinking about people might want to reflect individually or as a group. So there may be value in some group and individual reflection, and potentially optional times to encourage people to think a little bit deeper. Some projects may even provide a few guiding questions to help people reflect. And then icebreakers, pretty sure that this is self-explanatory. But icebreakers can really break up the on-site orientation and training. Even a quote-unquote icebreaker like the supervisor who mentioned going out into the community and doing a scavenger hunt. It's a different type of icebreaker, and sometimes icebreakers can feel awkward, but it's really a way to get them involved, active, and having a lot of fun. So now, let's explore each one of these a little bit in detail. One of the primary adult learning methodologies used in the training world is David Kolb's Experiential Learning Cycle, what he calls ELC. And this actually relates very well to on-site orientation and training. His model identifies 4 specific stages a learner goes through when learning or mastering a new concept or skill. First, the learner will have a concrete experience, either creating the experience or encountering an experience of some kind. Next, he or she will reflect on the experience to identify what happened and what were the outcomes. Then, based on what happened, the learner will use abstract conceptualization to reflect on what the outcomes of the experience imply and what he or she can learn from this. During this third stage, the learner will think and plan on how to influence the outcomes in a similar experience in the future. And in the fourth stage, the learner will actively implement the new learning and thinking and apply it to a similar experience. And then the cycle continues. So let's give you a quick example. Let's say maybe you want the members to learn about the protocols of facilitating community meetings. First, you can create an experience by letting them participate in and observe an actual local meeting. Then, allow them time to reflect and think about their experience being involved in the meeting, and then they're able to draw learnings and discoveries from what they experienced. Then, when you get to the fourth stage, they actually put into practice what they have learned and actively implement their findings in conducting or leading a meeting of their own. That leads us to the second aspect, collaborative and peer learning. So think about some opportunities and ways to encourage collaborative and peer learning through the OSAT as we discussed earlier. By doing this, you'll create a lot of opportunities, especially for members to utilize and share their strengths with other VISTA members and staff. By doing so, you'll also establish a collaborative learning culture among your member cohort. So, let's take another example. If we're planning to train VISTA members in public speaking, we might find that one of their peers has a lot of experience and expertise in public speaking. Great. So we can invite that member to train and coach others in how to effectively communicate to an audience, which really sets the tone for peer sharing during and after the OSAT. Simple but easy example, which leads us into step number 3, multiple reflective settings. We cannot stress enough that it is essential to allow multiple reflective opportunities during the on-site orientation and training for members to critically think about and internalize what they are learning, and for some people, they're actually reflecting on, are they still interested in serving? Was this the right fit? Is this a good fit? And it's not to scare them, but they really want to think about, did I make the right decision? Am I learning? Am I having fun? We've learned a lot from our own past trainings that we need to be very intentional about designing opportunities specifically for multiple reflection times. Generally, some of the key techniques for this to happen is to build in opportunities for individual reflections as part of a training. It could be individual time, pair work, small group work, and large group discussions. So, to put some context around this, let's provide another example. Your members are watching a video about a community and cultural norms during the OSAT. Once they have watched the video, one option is you could provide a few minutes for them to individually respond to some reflection questions and then pair up with someone and discuss their responses. After that, have them discuss a smaller or larger group setting. By doing this, you'll provide opportunities for each person to engage in the activity fully as well as learn from others. Now, you don't have to designate a lot of time for each element because some people don't find reflecting too long to be too useful, but you want to find that sweet spot of giving them enough time but also checking in with them. By doing so, we help give them time to develop analytical and critical thinking skills as well, which is critical for their Vista assignment description and the service they'll do throughout their year. Which leads us into step number 4, icebreakers and energizers. We won't spend a lot of time on this one because, again, it is fairly self-explanatory. But while I do provide some details on icebreakers, go ahead and type in the chat, what are your favorite icebreaker or energizer, especially if it's one that you feel is effective and you found fun and useful. We know that, of course, you can go on Google or Yahoo or any of the search engines to find icebreakers, but it really helps to hear from people who actually use them so you can learn and find other icebreakers and energizers that you can use. First, let's make sure that our icebreakers and energizers are purposeful and fun. For example, choose an activity that is fun but also contributes towards problem solving by solving a problem together. Icebreakers and energizers could also be a great link to a training session. For example, if your session theme is problem solving, incorporating an icebreaker or energizer that is fun and has a problem solving spin to it can really build an ice bridge to your session while getting people moving around and active. It's also important to make sure that the icebreakers and energizers we choose are inclusive. And inclusive has many different meanings, but in this example, if we happen to have participants using wheelchairs, we need to make sure that the nature of the activity is not going to limit their activity to be able to fully participate. Also, we want to make sure that our icebreakers are culturally sensitive to the participants, the community, and the context. This sensitivity should be reflected in the language and materials we use for such activities. For example, we don't want to have an energizer that might involve touching people or hugging people if the organization is in a community that's just not a cultural norm or people are not comfortable with that. Be mindful and be culturally sensitive to what's going on. Icebreakers should also provide great opportunities for reflection, as we just discussed. If the activity involves, let's say, an icebreaker that is doing something without talking to each other, a silent activity, you might want to add an open-ended question at the end of the activity, such as, how was it to do the activity without talking? Or, what can you learn about other people through nonverbal communication, and what can you learn about yourself? These questions can generate insightful reflections and learning. So I see a lot of comments in the chat. Concentric circles is an icebreaker. Do a privilege walk. Quite a few comments coming in faster than I can read. So I'll continue, but keep those coming because these are some really great ideas, including a snowball fight, writing ideas on paper and balling them up and throwing them to a circle. It gets people engaged. These are great ideas. And so as we look at these, we also want to quickly turn back to JC's example from Feeding Texas to look at how they engage Vista members. JC commented that in Feeding Texas, they conduct an initial training with Vista members in their first 3 weeks of service, working to make the training engaging and exciting to inspire members. At their initial training, they try to switch up the location each day to give them a break, which has proven helpful in keeping Vista members engaged and showing just different places that they can get to. With subsites, it's essential to help them really own the OSAT and make it their own, because although if you're an intermediary and you have subsites, you want the subsites to have some buy-in as well, and that's what Feeding Texas learned as a great option. Also, we know that all plans such as these have great intentions, but how can you make your on-site orientation and training responsive to emerging needs in knowing that things do not always turn out the way you plan? So we're now going to move down the line to examine the third facet making on-site orientation and training responsive to emerging needs. As we all have learned from designing and delivering trainings, there are always training needs that can emerge once the training process starts. 3 ways that can arise are questions that surface during the applicant interview, the time between the initial interview application and when they start service, and the conversations with VISTA supervisors and staff. We know that you've probably found other ways or reasons for new training needs to pop up prior to and during the on-site orientation and training. So you can go ahead and type those ideas in the chat as we move on, but you'll see on the screen the question to type in the chat is, in what other ways can learning needs emerge? Just think about ways that you found ways to find what people need and want. These will be really, really helpful and very useful. And while you do that, we're going to go ahead and talk about continuous monitoring. So on this slide, you can see there's a couple of bullets. We've seen from your responses throughout today, there's a lot of ways that needs can emerge during your on-site orientation and training. Because of this, it's important to continuously monitor members' needs and skills and do a pulse check to ensure that their needs are being met. Ways to do this are frequent check-ins. You can check in with them daily, weekly. The important thing to know about frequent check-ins, get to know your member. Some of them might think daily check-ins feels like you're micromanaging. But again, you want to get to know your member to find out what the sweet spot is. I learned when I was a VISTA member, my sweet spot was a couple times a week. That allowed me time to have my freedom and get my VAD done and think about what to ask my supervisor, but it didn't feel like I was being overwhelmed. Next, open and inviting. We all like to think that we're open and inviting, but sometimes we don't come across that way. So make sure that we do a 360-degree evaluation and monitoring of ourselves, of our trainings, just as we want the VISTA to evaluate the on-site orientation and training. We probably also want the VISTA to give you feedback as a supervisor and sponsor, whether it's in writing or verbally, just to say, you know, I really like what's going on, but maybe we could phrase things differently to help me move on. So keep in mind being open and inviting in your monitoring, especially because the term monitoring sometimes has a connotation of someone is overseeing you and watching you. And then finally, suggestions and feedback seeking. We know that along with creating an inviting space, constantly asking the VISTA member for their suggestions and working to implement some of them are key to success. That way they feel valued. And with that, we're going to briefly talk about a few of the ways that JC's program uses evaluations at Feeding Texas. So JC mentions that they use the OSOT process as a responsive way to understand emerging needs, essentially by creating training evaluations and surveys. They do one at the end of their 2.5-day statewide training, and they do one at the end of their on-site orientation and training for their subsites. They have a separate evaluation for their subsites that VISTA members completed during their first 3 weeks. It was fairly simple, but it really helped to give the subsite an idea of what to keep, what to eliminate, and what to modify in the future. It's essential to be very attentive to what the VISTA members need in their first few weeks, and JC mentions it's also integral to onboarding and helping the VISTA member acclimate to the new environment. This information is useful for the on-site orientation and training, as well as impactful in helping you retain your VISTA members. So as we get close to wrapping up, we'll mention that utilizing the 3 facets we've discussed, customized, engaging, and responsive, will help ensure that your candidates can get the most out of the on-site orientation and training so they are best prepared for their VISTA service, and that the organization has well-equipped members. We've discussed these important aspects of ensuring a successful OSOT, but we know that there's also a ton of resources that you can utilize on the VISTA campus. On this page of the VISTA campus, you'll find an on-site orientation and training checklist, planning worksheet, and a calendar template, and resources to assist you with community entry for your VISTA member. Again, to access these, the easiest way is to download the handouts, the helpful links handout from the handouts panel, but you can also search for them on the VISTA campus. On the next screen, you'll see a screenshot of a tool that was developed very, very well. That's called Orienting Your VISTA, On-Site Orientation and Training Guidebook. Vista leaders designed this as part of an action learning project. It includes lots of tools, tips, tricks, and ideas that really, again, show you how do you make your on-site orientation and training effective and useful. So be sure to look at that. That is on the Vista campus. But we do want to next move on to invite you to reflect on the conversations that we've had and think about a few concrete next steps that you would like to take towards creating customized, engaging, and responsive OSATs. So, quick next steps. What can you take away and start working on? First, you can conduct a thorough needs assessment and analysis using the VAD to figure out what do you need and what does your Vista member need. Second, work towards continuously evaluating your on-site orientation and training with approval from the CNCF site office and get ideas for improvement from your Vista members, from other staff, and people who don't even know about the Vista program who can guide you on making it engaging and effective. Next, develop or locate meaningful icebreakers or energizers as we discussed earlier. Also, make sure to customize your OSAT to the needs of your Vista members and the organization as well as to their personalities. The more you can customize it and make it personal, the more the Vista member will feel valued and like you're actually paying attention to who they are and what they need. Next, encourage members to feel comfortable asking questions and seeking answers. Don't just identify the problems, but work with them to find the solutions. And ensure that every Vista candidate has an overview of your on-site orientation and training plan for use during their Vista member orientation and during other trainings. So with that, we're going to move on to our webinar evaluation. We'd first like to know what you thought. We know that this was a lot of information jam-packed into a really tiny, short space, so thank you for your patience. But please take a few moments to share your feedback in the webinar. You'll see on the screen there's a web links panel. You can click on that link, and it should bring you directly to the SurveyMonkey for the survey. And while you take the survey, I know we're past the hour, but I think there are some questions coming in over the chat panel. So we'll take some questions specifically in the chat panel. And one of the questions I see coming in is, one of the questions I see from Jessica is, if our webinar presenters can go back to the earlier slides that talk about the date requirements for the Vista member orientation. They can do that while we're talking and responding to other questions. I'm scrolling through the chat panel to see, I see some people typing now. There's a question that came in earlier that, yes, very important question, and this might be my mistake. Where can we find the template for the training spreadsheet? I was certain that it was on the Vista campus, but it may have been temporarily taken off. As you see, we've made some Vista campus upgrades and changes, and I might have failed to make sure it got reloaded. So I will look for it and try to repost it and send out an email with the link to it, because it sounds like that will be very useful in terms of the template for the training calendar. So thank you for that. I apologize. I will look at that. Next question, it looks like, is from, there was a question about different trainings the Vista program offers, because we talk about on-site orientation and training, which also you want to dovetail with the trainings we offered. So earlier we talked about the Vista member orientation, which is one orientation and training that the Vista program offers. But we also, the Vista program offers lots of webinars, and I'll mention right now, the Vista program is talking about, we do, I believe it's 12 webinars a year for members. So our staff does a lot of webinars. For Vista members, we do 12 webinars a year, one a month, typically on different topics that Vista members have specifically said they need help with, whether it's how to live on the living allowance. We train them. Yesterday we had a webinar training on how to maximize the Vista healthcare benefit for people who had serious questions on how do I make the most of my healthcare benefit. So we do that. And then, of course, we have webinars, 12 webinars a year for Vista supervisors, and we also do webinars for Vista leaders. In addition to that, there's lots of other trainings available for anyone on the Vista campus, whether they're tutorials or sessions, recorded webinars. That's a lot of what we offer. I'll quickly mention one other thing related to training is the Vista program, in addition to the trainings we offer, does now have the availability for some in-service trainings. Vista members who are eligible for those trainings get emails about them, and those are in-service trainings that are focused specifically on things that Vista members need while they're in service. More information to come about that, but it's a great opportunity to encourage your Vista to go to these in-service trainings and get more information to help them successfully accomplish their VAD. On the slide now, we went back to the slide that lists the dates that I think people were asking about. But if you do have additional questions on these, remember on the Vista campus, if you go to what we call the Starting Vista page of the Vista campus, it outlines all the details and the requirements of the Vista member orientation to make sure that you and your Vista members are aware of what's required. And I think we have time for one more question. And let me see. So there was a comment when the Vista program sends out information about webinars, we send it through a system called GovDelivery, and we try to send it to all Vista supervisors. If you don't receive the emails about webinars, then you might need to check with your eGrants grantee administrator to update the user roles, because it does go out to all Vista supervisors, whether they're a Vista project director, or we try to also send it to site supervisors and make sure it gets out to as many people as possible. But you can also always visit the webinars page of the Vista campus, which will have links to upcoming webinars. And the last question I see is just about a confirmation. Stephanie, I'll respond to your question separately. But yes, when it comes to webinars, we do know that who attended, but we don't send out special confirmation that someone attended, but I can check on you separately. So if there are additional questions, keep them coming in the chat, but I'm going to now actually close the presentation and move towards the very end so that if you do need to sign off, you can. We do want to say, if you do have further questions specifically related to webinars, you can email us at vistatraining@cns.gov. We do monitor that inbox. And also, the final slide we want to mention is thank you for joining us on today's webinar. We are not having a monthly webinar in July. Our next monthly webinar for supervisors will be in August. More information will come soon. But a special thank you to our Vista staff and previous staff members who really worked with me and helped define the content for this webinar, including J.C. Dwyer, Capula Webagama, Jessica Birch, Kathy Lenz, Amy Kanata, Jenny Farrell, Ryan Fewens-Bliss, Rachel Raddick, and Barbara Reynolds. Thank you to our partners at LSI, Steve and Sabrina, for helping to manage the Adobe Connect technology. But I really want to thank, I shouldn't say but, and I really also want to thank all of you for joining us today, because you are serving the critical and influential role of Vista supervisor and sponsor. Your work is essential, meaningful, and very important to us. Thank you for being here. We'll stay on for a few minutes on Adobe Connect to answer a couple of questions, but you can go ahead and sign off if you're finished.